Lakshmi, are you there?
Yes, Adam, I'm here. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. I'm just waiting for just to make sure that everyone is here.
Fantastic. If you need any support, Adam, if I'm out of this workstation, just call me on my mobile, then I'll be there. Okay. So we'll wait for another 5 minutes being the first day. We'll start by 9:10. 9:10, Adam. Is that okay?
Yep, that should work, no problem.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, meantime, while we wait for others, right? I do see there are a couple of people here. So can you just have a quick introduction? Probably what I'm looking at is, let me know what is your technical background or which team that you're currently working and what is your responsibilities day to day and what is the focus of this training specifically for you, which means what is that you are expecting at the end of this training will be adding value to your responsibility. Okay, so if you can just give me a brief introduction, that will also help me to understand each one of you very well. So can we have a quick introduction? I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, you're audible to me, Adam.
Okay, participants.
Yeah. Yeah, please respond.
Hey, am I audible to others? Ahmed, Kodai, Preeti, Selva, Priyadarshini, Ashwini, Rohit, Asad, Balaji. Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, you're right.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, just to help me understand you guys better, can you just give a quick introduction about yourself? What's your technical background, which team that you're working, and what's your expectation from this training?
Hi, Adam. This is Ram. So I work for the NASDAQ project based out in Chennai. I have around more than 6 years of experience and mostly in Java backend services. So in this training, I'm looking to learn more about the DevOps process and the tools like Jenkins and how it is containerized using Docker and Kubernetes.
Okay, that's great. In fact, you're the beginner. So you're the opener for the team. All right, I got it. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Koda here. I have been working with Indian Bank project.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm working with Indian Bank project and I have started with DevOps and Jenkins. I know the basics of DevOps and Jenkins. To get a deep dive in DevOps, I have here to learn.
Okay, so what is your role day to day? I mean, I'm just trying to understand where do you guys use this tool? So what is your role in DevOps? Why do we need all these tools for your day-to-day activity?
Your voice is breaking.
Hey, the question is, what is your expectation of these tools? I mean, where do you want to use these tools in your day-to-day work?
Basically, this is Asad, sir. And basically, we want to use this tool for making our day-to-day activities easier. For example, if the developers had developed the code, so after the one-time setup of CI/CD, then it should be not worried about anyone to deploy that thing on the server and take the infra side part. That is the thing. That's why we need DevOps. If there is an issue, then it will send a mail to a user regarding that. Like that kinds of things are done in DevOps. So my expectation is that.
Okay, I get it. But the question that I wanted to understand is, what is your background? So is it all of you are going to do this administration task, take care of different jobs and ensure how the pipeline will be defined? Or it is necessary that since as an organization, there will be a DevOps process that is implemented, you have to be aware so that if there is any issue, you should be helping certain people to debug as a developer or as a QA engineer. So that's where I just wanted to know so that I can, talk specifically about those examples related to your day-to-day work. So that's the reason I'm trying to understand. So please do let me know, are you from a development background? Are you from a core DevOps team or from a build team or a release team or an operation team? So where is that you're going to use these tools? So that's what I was looking at.
So basically, I'm in an infra team, an operations part, and I'm doing all the release kind of work and DevOps thing. And I've implemented a Jenkins CI/CD pipeline for my project in UAT, but didn't have the experience how to do that with good practice. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I got it. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm from testing background. I'm a test analyst. I'm working for Indian college where we are trying to implement DevOps here. I'm not from a DevOps background. I don't have experience in DevOps. So I would like to know more about this and what different phases and all. So to get overall picture, I am here. And as I said, if we have any issues, it helps me as a tester to debug from where it is. I think it can be helpful. I also got some trainings in DevOps offline.
Hey, your voice was actually breaking. I'm not sure if it's for everyone.
Okay, sure.
Were the others able to hear that, or is it only from my side? Your voice was actually breaking. Yeah, I understand there's a lot of network issues, but yeah, I heard you half, but the problem was.
Are you able to hear me better now?
Yes, this is better. Thank you.
Yeah, actually I'm from testing background. I have both functional and automation testing experience, but I don't have any DevOps experience. I mean, in the testing phase or in any of the phase which I have worked in my previous projects, it's not in DevOps. So I would like to know more about this. Since we are going to implement DevOps in our current project, I wanted to learn more. That's the reason I'm here. As you said, it may helpful for me to debug if there is any issues or so. And just to have an overall picture, I already have some trainings offline. So I would like to learn more on DevOps. That's the reason I'm here.
Hey, that's nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Akash here. So I belong to a development team again from NASDAQ, as what Ram mentioned. So particularly, we are not, actually doing the pipeline setup and all, but we do use the Jenkins, Docker, Kubernetes, Ansible, all those stuff to set up a pipeline and get deployed on the AWS. So just wanted to have a fair idea on how those tools fit into and how do we, actually set up and get the things working. So that is what my expectations are to understand the basic workings of all these tools.
Okay, cool. I got it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Punita. So I'm the technical lead. So from my team, actually around 7 developers are there. So currently we are working on for Indian Bank project. On that project, we are going to implement DevOps. So we need to understand, we are going to automate our process. That DevOps we are going to implement in OpenShift. So already we are doing R&D, and then we have some idea about Kubernetes, Jenkins, and then Sonarqube. So we are working on some of the pipelines, how we can install Sonarqube in Jenkins, how we can pull the resource code from source management tool, and then how we can build the jar. So after that, we are working on Docker also. So we have some basic idea. So anyway, these session has to, if we get detailed knowledge in the DevOps, so it will be more helpful for us to implement the same in our project. So we need a detailed understanding of Jenkins and then Sonarqube pipelines, and then image creations, and then pushing the image to image registry. So deployment, and then containerization. So all the concepts we have to understand.
Okay, I got it. Thanks, Monica. Yep, I got it. It's more of the pipeline.
And one more thing, we need to try some hands-on also. So that lab exercise. And anyway, as per our R&D, we are working on currently. So somewhat we need to understand more because these process we are going to implement in our project. So we have to understand more about DevOps, and then how it is deploying, how we can automate, how the automate process is happening. So everything we have to understand.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
No one? Okay, so I want this session to be more interactive by saying it, it'll be easy for me to discuss and understand. And it doesn't matter what kind of questions that you're going to have. Feel free to ask questions, even if it's on. Hey, sorry, some network issue from my side. So what I was trying to say is, I want to keep the session more interactive. Okay, so what we will do is, since there are people from different background, the way that we will be going through is from scratch, and I'll try to give you, sorry. So we'll talk more about, what is the problem statement, how do we use different automation to solve that problem statement, and for that, what are the different scenarios in which you can use a tool. Okay, so that way we will get more hands-on. So rather than just jumping into tools and talking about tools, I do understand you need to know how the overall concept of DevOps can be implemented to automate various tools put together, right? So that's where the focus would be majorly on scenario based, so that if you know the problem statement and you also know the different ways to solve it. Now, by saying it, what I want you guys is to keep it more interactive, because even I'll be asking questions, and doesn't matter if it is small or a big question, a question is a question. So please feel free to ask any question, because sometimes there might be someone else who knows a little more, but it doesn't mean that you should not ask question, right? So please do ask question. Same way, as I go through, since we have a combination of different groups, I'll be asking certain questions on how deeper you want the topic to be, because as I heard from different people, there might be few teams who might be interested to go a little deeper. And there are other members who might not be interested, but again, it's more of a collaborative session that we are going to have. So if there is any questions like that, so I'll let you know, but please let me know how deeper that you want to go through so that we can spend more time on some specific topics. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to do. And the second thing before we jump in, I do believe everyone has some VMs created because we were interested from the management that we expect two things. One is all of you have VMs with you, and that is what you're going to use to install and basically practice everything what we are going to see. That is one. And the second part is I'm expecting that since most of you are talking about the word called DevOps, so I do believe that you guys at least know the basics of what is SDLC and what is DevOps. But however, if there is something new that I'm talking about or asking questions, please free to let me know. You need more details onto it. Okay. So with this assumption, let's go ahead. And by the way, let me just introduce myself. So my name is Adam, and I'm a DevOps architect by profession, but I also do more of technical trainings by passion. So that way I do have hands-on experience working on different set of tools in DevOps, whether that's related to the release management, that's what you guys are focusing today, which talks more about how continuous development will happen, continuous testing will happen, how do you containerize your application, and how do you make sure that as an application you can deploy, how do you set up different pipelines to help your code to be in a place where it is ready for deployment. So that is one part of DevOps that we are going to focus for this session. However, on the DevOps is another side of operations where you will be focusing about infrastructure creation, managing that infra, configuring them, and monitoring, which is where a couple of other tools like Terraform, Ansible, or your monitoring tools will be coming into the picture. But anyway, that's not the scope what we have. So we'll talk more about the first part, which is release management, and yeah, that's what my background is. Okay, just give me 1 minute. So is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes.
All right, great. Now, once again, as I said, in an organization, why do we need DevOps? It is because the focus is to help us get continuous delivery. Okay, so what do you mean by continuous delivery? So at a time when you are trying to do some development to achieve a release, you need to ensure that the development happens continuous, and corresponding to that, the testing also happens continuous, and then you hand it over to your customer or you deploy it to a particular production place. So that way, now, development, and for QA, you will be doing continuous testing. But in between that, how do you automate the day-to-day tasks, or how do you define the so-called pipeline is what we need to know. Okay. Now, with that, does everyone understand the concept of version controlling system? And what version controlling system are you guys using it?
So Git.
Okay. And what is the repository manager for Git you guys use?
Nexus.
Hey, actually, I think there's network issue. So my question was, what is the version controlling tool that you guys using currently? And if you say Git, in Git, what is your repository manager?
Bitbucket.
Okay, so do you use GitHub or do you use GitLab or do you use Bitbucket? What do you use as a central repository server for Git?
GitHub and Gitolite.
GitHub. Okay, I also hear we have GitLab. So is it
Gitolite.
that
Gitolite.
Gitolite? Okay, and I also saw a GitLab. So is it there's a different flavors for different clients or different teams? Okay, guys, again, I would request it's better if we keep it more interactive. If not, it's just going to be one-way discussion where I keep telling something and you would be just going ahead and noting it down. But rather, I want it to be more of interactive method. So can I please request everyone to at least answer? Yeah, I know that you mentioned that you have mic issues, but it would be more easier for us to pick up the session if it's more interactive. So what about others? Is everyone aware of version controlling tool? Okay. Anyway, let me start. But again, I'm repeating. If you guys are being silent, then the only impression that I would get is you're understanding everything or you know everything. Okay. So if there's a task which is being given, and if you're not able to do it, it'll be difficult. So that's the reason I'm asking. If you guys let me know the answer, either yes, no, or if you very clearly say that, okay, I don't know what is that, then that's my responsibility that I'll help you in understanding. Okay, so if you keep silent, then I have to just assume that, okay, you know everything and you're just keeping silent because of that.
Sir, what is
All right.
repository manager, sir?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. That means if you don't know, it's not a problem. Okay, I think before we jump into this, let me just take a few minutes about Git and I'll come back. Okay. Now, in an organization, all the code that you write, which we generally call it as a source code or a project. So you need to track so that all the changes that has been done by different developers are stored in a place and you can go back and look at any point of time on who did the change, what and all files were modified. Now in that way, if you talk about any version controlling system, okay, there will be two parts of it. One is the client and the other one is what we call it as the server. Okay. Now, whether you take your Subversion or whether you take Perforce or ClearCase or Git, there are two sides. Okay. So the server is the one where you are actually going to store all your files. But what happens in the server is you don't just dump all the files, but you create logical groups, which is what we call it as repository. For example, now in your organization, if you have 4 projects, okay, and corresponding to each project, if you want to store all the source code into it, then what you have to do is you have to create repositories, or what we call it as folders, in the server, which is going to store all the corresponding files for a given project. So that way, a server will be divided into what we call it as folders or repositories. And for example, here, if I say repository, now let's assume this is for a product A, and you can have a repository for product B. Okay, same way, it's not mandatory that you're going to keep only the source code for a project, but in fact, when you are working in your day-to-day life, there will be a lot of automation that you have to do. So being a QA person, or being into an operation, or being into a person who's taking care of build or the same DevOps activity, you have to write some kind of scripts, which could be a PowerShell or a shell or a Python script. Now, anything that you take it as a code, you need to store it into the same location. So that's where the repository that you're going to have in a version controlling system can be for a project, or you can also have your source code which is needed for some kind of automation, or later on, as we move forward, you might try to develop some configuration files like a JSON file or a YAML file, or you might have Jenkins file, Docker file. In Kubernetes, you will be having the manifest YAML files. Now, where are you going to store all of them? Now, all of them will be stored into different repositories. So that's where repository is a location or a folder in the server in which you store all the files related to a project here. And this project can be a project which you are going to release it to the customer, which is where, if it is a Java-based project, then you're going to put all your Java source code. If not, you can have a project for some automation in your DevOps, then related to that, whatever the scripts, configuration files, or some documents that you're going to write, you can store all of them into it as a separate repo. So this way, any changes that you do to this repo will be only within this. And anytime if you go inside, you will be able to see all the details. Okay. Now, to understand it much more better, think of it like a bank account. Okay. Now, server is like a bank, and in that there will be different accounts that will be there, wherein any number of transactions that you do, you put money, you remove it, all those things will be specific to a account, right? So that way, if I go to my account, I'll be able to see all the transactions which is available. Same way, if I go to another account, I'll be able to see the details. So that's how any transactions that happens on a bank account resides in that. The same way, in a repository, any kind of files that you put, modify, add, everything will be within repository. Now, why we are talking about this repository is because now, as a user, if you want to work, you will not be using the server, because a server is going to contain the metadata of everything. Okay, for example, you have a bank account. Now, your bank has a server, and in that server, all the files are there. So are you going to the server of the bank and trying to modify? No. So basically, you might use your laptop or your mobile, or you go to an ATM and use a client to communicate to your server. The same way, now in the version controlling system, now you will be having a client. Okay. Now again, this is going to be specific to the tool. And what this client will do is help you to communicate to the server. And in that server, which repository that you want to communicate. Okay. Now, when you're working in this client, what you will be doing ideally is you will be creating a folder. Okay. Because unlike a bank, what is the need for us to use a client? So if I am working on a project A, I want the flexibility to read or write into this repository A. So that way, if I'm working on a project where my repository is C, then I need a place where I can see the files, which could be for read-only purpose, like for QA. You just need the files. But The same way for build, you need only the files in a read-only mode. But if you're a developer or if you're a person who's going to modify, then the same repository, you need the files to be available in a read-write mode. So that's how in the client, you are going to create what we call it as workspace. And in this, you're going to basically see all the files which is specific to a repository. So just like your bank ATM, you go to the ATM and with respect to your card number or account number, when you log in, there will be a space which is connected to this particular account of yours. The same way, in the client, you will be having a workspace which will connect to a particular repository. Okay, now that's where client is the place where you actually see the files, modify the files, or basically you see everything in a physical form. However, the metadata of all these things will be stored into a location, which is what we call it as the server. Okay, and this is for the administrators to maintain. So for a user, when you start doing some changes, all you will do is first choose which repository you want. Based on that, you will create the workspace, and then inside this, whatever the files are available, it will be visible for you. And from here, you use it for read only or read write, and then put it back. And that's where technically there are two steps which we call. So one is checkout, which is nothing but the ability where you're taking the content of a particular repository from a server into the workspace. And once you do the changes, and if you want to store it back to the repository, then you will use another concept or a word which is called as checking. So this way, in checkout, you get the files in a read-only mode. Then you modify it using your client on your local machine or a remote machine. And that changes, you will put it back by doing check-in, then it will go back to your repository. Okay, so that way, now, if you take Subversion, the same way, you have a Subversion server which contains the metadata, and you have the SVN or Subversion client using which you will be checking out, doing the changes and checking and storing it back. The same way, when you talk about Git is more of the client side, because you install the Git client on your laptop or on a machine, and you will be running the client side commands. And for Git, there is a central server, which is where you can use GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or other things that you guys are using currently. So that way, these tools, which is where it is going to manage the server and the repositories, we generally call it as the server or the repository managers for the server or the version control tool. Okay, so that is what my question that I was asking, because when you say Git, you are talking about the client side. So what is the server side for Git is what my question. Got it? Or anyway, for those who know, I think this is what something similar you would be doing, right? Okay, I think who was the person asked this question? Asad, did you get this?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, please call me Adam. All right. Fine, I'll do one thing. Looks like if you are not familiar with version controlling system or Git, because we'll be using Git a lot. Now, in case if you want to brush up, ping me, I'll share some of the videos that we have. So you can just go back on your spare time and then brush up the Git, because the focus here, like I said, expectation was, you know, certain basics that includes version controlling system. But anyway, if you don't know, please let me know at the end so that I can share some videos. You can just prepare that. Okay. Okay, now coming back to the subject. Now what happens is, when in a project, like again, when I say project, I'm considering a development project for a release. And in that, you might have some code like your Java-based code. So what happens is a developer will try to create a workspace using the client, and he will do some changes, and then he's going to submit it back. Okay. Now this process keeps happening to and fro. Now, when a developer is trying to kind of create a workspace and modify, before checking in, what he or she will be doing is a unit test. Okay, so that way, I think before I jump to Jenkins, let us talk about some workflow. Okay, and then we will come back. Now, please help me if there is anything that you are not clear, or if your organization is doing something little different. So let me talk specifically on it. So what happens now, for this example, assume that I'm going to refer as the GitLab to be my central repository or the repository manager for my Git. So what happens is, when a developer wants to do his work, so basically he will choose a repository from GitLab, and what he or she will do, they will clone and create a workspace in their machine. Now this machine can be their laptop, or this machine can be some other remote machine that you use for your development work. So what they will do, once they do the checkout, they will be able to see all the source code, which is a Java-based code. Now, once the code is visible, they will go ahead with the build process, in which they will be compiling all the source code into our object files, right? Now, again, this they will be doing only for the source code which they have modified. Now, what happens after that? Now, once the object files has been compiled, then they have to go through a step called as packaging, which is where they will be creating a jar or a var, depending on what kind of component that they are trying to build. So this is where there are some build tools available. Like for Java, you can use Ant, which is a traditional tool, or you can use Maven, or if you're using something latest, then you can use Gradle. So any of these tools you can use. And by running that, you will be able to get the entire files specifically based on what is your interest. It will be compiled, you will get the class files, and you will generate a jar or var. Okay, so that is what is, we call it as a software build. Now, the build that a developer does in his workspace will be only based on the files that he or she has modified. Because if you are a developer and you are just modifying one component, maybe you have modified one files or just few files in your project, and when you do a build, what you're going to generate is a jar or var with only those files. But what happens? How is that as a developer you're going to confirm that this is good? And that's where the first level of testing happens, which we call it as unit testing. Okay. Now, once the unit test is done, now again, this unit test will be specific to component, where you might just execute it and see some results, or you might have to connect to some database and get some results. But regardless of that, as a developer, you will be executing this unit test on your local workspace, and only when all of them is being successful, and once based on the review, they will be doing a check-in and push the code back to the central server. Okay, so this process is what we generally call it as the build process, and this keep happening for every user, and every time they modify the file, they will do this. Okay, but now what we are testing is only the unit test code, which is nothing but your project might contain 10,000 Java files, but what the developer has developed or modified in this workflow is 2 files or few files, and the unit test will also be only for those few files. But what happens now? How are you going to do the functional testing? Now, this is where, in order for QA to do the functional test, you need an entire project to be available, because whatever the build that an individual developer is doing is only his code, which is why we call it as unit build or unit test. But whatever that is needed for QA, what happens? We need to generate a full build. Okay. Now, ideally, in organization, we call it as a nightly build, because when is that I'm going to do a full build? Now, I cannot take a build whenever a developer does a push, because if I take the code based on one developer sharing his code, I will not be getting the entire functionality of my product. So that's where you will have certain cutoff period, which could be like once in a day or once in a couple of hours in a day, depending on your need. So based on that requirement, we are going to take the latest code once again from your workspace. And here we will go ahead and do the same process of build, but the difference is we will be doing a full product build, or we call it as clean build. In this, we are going to develop an artifact, which is where it is not going to be just an artifact which will contain 1 or 2 files. So this will be containing your entire project. Okay, and once we generate it, this is what we are going to give it to QA to do different kinds of testing, like functional testing or integration testing or regression testing. Okay, so pretty much we move on to different phases. So this is the process what we go through in terms of build. And if you see here, a developer will be doing the build, hence we call it as developer build in this local machine. But for a QA, if you are automating the process, then someone has to do it, or it's more about how are we going to automate this process. Okay, so which is where now we need to first understand, keep running it manually, correct? Because let's assume for a project, I'm telling that I want a build like this to happen every day at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then every day at 8 o'clock in the evening. Let's say that. Then someone has to go to this machine, which is meant for this nightly build. There you have to do the latest code, and then you have to run some command like a Maven command to package. And once it is done, you need to cross check whether it is all fine, and then give it to QA, correct? So this process requires manual effort. But what if the same thing, as we are focusing in DevOps, I want to do a continuous delivery, then the cycle in which QA is going to test, if it increases, then what will happen? In a day, I want you to do this 4 times or 5 times, then how will you manage? So that's where there is an automation needed, in which instead of you doing it, you want an automated way of achieving the build, which is one of the requirement in your SDLC. Okay, so I believe this is what you will be, or you are doing currently. Now, any questions in this before I jump to the next one? No questions? Others? Okay, awesome. That means you know this subject. Okay. Fine. Now, let's elaborate a little bit on what we have seen here. Okay. Now, this is where the same statement what I was talking about, that you have a developer build and you have a nightly build which we have to give it to QA. Now let's assume the same scenario. So your project has, let's say, only 4 files, okay, for better understanding. And this is what we have stored as a repository in the server like GitLab. Now, at 10 o'clock, there is a developer who checks out the code and he modifies these 2 files and he submits a new check-in or a revision called C1. Okay. Now, Before he submits, he should have done a unit test of only 1.java and 2.java, and everything was working fine. Same way, let's say at 12 o'clock, another developer submitted a second revision or a second commit ID or a check-in where he has modified 2.java and 4.java, and he tested, unit test worked fine, and he submitted the code. Then same way at 2 o'clock, another person modified 1.java and 3.java, and it was stored. So like this, assume in 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock, all of them modified different files. Okay, and all of them did their unit test and everything is working perfect in their development workspace. Okay, now when I want to give a build to QA, so let's say at 6 o'clock, I have set up a process where at the end of the day, I want to generate a nightly build, which consists of all the code which developers have modified in the day. So now, when I try to create a workspace with the latest code, we will be getting the latest commit ID or the revision called C6. Okay, so when I take a copy of this, I will get all the files which is latest in that. 3.java and 4.java will be pointing to this, but the 1.java and 2.java will be pointing to the previous one because this is the latest, whereas C6 we got only because of this. So when I refer to C6, I'll be getting all the latest file available in the repo. So now, let's say that we go ahead and do a build. And while we are building, if everything is success, you give it back to QA or you automate to do your deployment, which is one step. But what happens if something failed? So this is where if there is a failure, either in compiling any of this code that you have, or while running some unit tests, some of the code failed. So this is where in the failure scenario, I'm not going to do anything because I will not be able to generate a jar or a var as an input because your compilation or the unit test itself is failing. So that's where there will be no jar or var created. So what is that we are going to do now? So in this scenario, neither you have a successful build and you can give it to QA, and QA will be waiting to generate a new build which has all the latest code. At the same time, it is our responsibility as an org to find out what caused this problem and fix it. Now, who can fix it? Only the developer should fix. Now the question comes, which developer will be asked to fix this problem? Okay, so can anyone tell me if I take a build at 6 o'clock from the latest, and if something is failing, whom should I be asking? Should I ask the guy who modified at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 12 or 10? Whom should I be asking to fix the problem? Anyone?
The last person who modified the code.
Okay, so you're saying I should ask this person who modified the file. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Any other opinions or anyone else agrees with the same? Okay, the last person is what you're saying, but again, each one. Okay, Heyman, what do you mean by each one? So now, if there are 5 people, are we going to ask all the 5?
So first we will check in which file we have got the error, and then regarding that we will tell that developer that he has to do the changes in that part of the thing.
Okay, very good question. Okay, now this is where if the file that is giving error is one.java, okay, then did this guy at 5 o'clock modified one.java? No, right? He has modified 3.java and 4.java. So from where is the one.java coming from? He never modified it. So one.java is coming from the previous commit. So now tell me if the problem is in one.java, where I found out, then whom should I be asking? You're getting the question? So I'm telling the problem is not 3.java, 4.java. The problem is on 1.java. Okay. So whom should I be asking to fix
it? 1, 3, and 4.
What do you mean 1, 3? So you're going to ask all of them?
First, I'll check with the C4 who made the latest changes on 1.
Okay. So what if I am the person who did it at 4 o'clock? I will tell you, hey, I did a unit test. Everything was fine. I don't believe that the change is caused or the error is caused from my side. So I'll just tell you that I am not the person. Then what will you do? Okay, you go to 2 p.m. and this guy also says the same thing that, hey, I did my test and my unit test is passed. So I'm not the person that you should be contacting. Move ahead. So you will go to 10. And what if that guy also says the same thing? So then now the question is not about solving, how quickly are you going to solve? So if I give you the same scenario, and what if I tell you there are 50 revisions like this between the last successful build and the current build? So when will you fix it? So will you keep asking each and every developer, hey, did you fix it or did you do this problem? And if you do it, what will happen? I need one person dedicated only to do this, correct? So this is where we need to understand that in a version controlling system, you take a file and on top of that, you keep modifying changes. Okay, so that way, assume if the problematic code is available in 1.java, which has been caused by this person. But the problem is, as an individual code, it is working fine. But only when the code which this guy has written is merged or combined with 4.java code, at that time it is not working. So logically, now what will you do? This is one scenario. Or there could be a scenario where this unit test is working fine. So developer was able to check in, but when he's trying to put the code integrated with other code, then at that time it is not working. Okay. Now you can take the latest code, but still unit test sometime will pass, but not the integrated code. That is what I'm trying to tell, because as a developer, you are not going to do functional test. You are trying to do a unit test. So for that, whatever is needed is what you are going to develop. So now coming back to the problem, it is not about finding out, but it's about how quickly that I can find, because all you said is completely correct, but it's a time consuming process. And now for me, like this, in a day, if I want to do 2 builds or 3 builds and give it to QA, you will be wasting 1 full day if a problem happens. And by that time you fix, if another problem gets introduced, the next cycle of the build will also get hot. Then typically you will be wasting 1 to 2 days in debugging everything. And more number of check-ins, more number of developers, this is going to be a complicated scenario. And I'm just talking about very simple 4 files. So that's when, what is the focus here? So the focus here, what we need to do is, instead of waiting until some point of a day where you're combining all the code or you're integrating all the code, and then you're going to do a build, which is where you are finding the problem. So instead of that, what we can do is adapt to a process where as soon as a developer submits his code, we can take at that level the complete set of code, and quickly we can do a compilation and unit test and verify whether everything is working fine. So by this way, what will happen? If I'm trying to run a build, as soon as a developer checks in or pushes, and if I find a problem, then I can know whether this code is a good code that I should be picking up for my next build. If not, I can immediately alert the developer that, hey, looks like the code that I'm trying to take, which is under your name, is not working fine officially. So I want you to go back and fix if there is a problem then and there. So that way, now, if a developer who has modified the change in the morning doesn't have to wait until sometime in the evening to know whether the problem is there. Because assume now you found the problem, okay, and this is the person who caused by doing some changes. Now, by the time I go back to him, you would have already wasted a lot of time. And not only that, the developer would have started working on another task or another development Jira ticket or whatever that you guys are following for your SDLC. Then what will happen? You need to ask him to stop the current priority and then try to take it. Wherein the problem that you can see which was introduced is a day before or a couple of hours before. So that's where it's not actually going to help you in doing continuous development. So continuous development is not just writing a code. You need to make sure that the code is given to QA successfully. And that's where what we need now is, even though we do a build at some point of time, which will be the full build, but for a developer, as soon as he checks in and pushes the code, we should be able to tell whether that code is a good code and can I actually take it for my QA for the next step. And that's where what we need to do is, as soon as a developer checks in, we should immediately take the latest code, or what we technically call it as integrated, and go through the same process of compiling and unit testing. And depending on whether it's a success or failure, we can report it back to the developer, so that if there is a problem, a developer can immediately find out that there is a code issue and he can go ahead and fix it. So that way, if he provides a fix before the next nightly build schedule, we will be always getting the code which is good code, right? The same way, assume that all these things are fine, only the 5 p.m. code failed. Then either you ask the developer to go ahead and revert his changes. If not, he can simply ignore this, and instead of taking the latest code, I can take from the last successful build that we have, which is C4. So that's where you're going to help the developer to immediately get to know whether his code is working or not. And at the same time, we don't have to halt QA in testing. So instead, we will always have a code which is working fine. And in case if you want, you can immediately take an action to revert the code if you find that there is an issue in the build or unit test. So that's how we need a build process to be triggered for every check-in that a developer does. Okay, and that process is what ideally we call it as a continuous integration. Okay, so now if you see, I need to set up automation because I cannot sit and manually do. There might be different check-ins coming at different time. Regardless of it, anytime if a check-in happens or a push happens to my repository or to my project, so immediately what we should do, we should take all the latest code at that point of time, and quickly we should be able to do a build and test And in case if it is failing, then we should be taking necessary action, like you can revert the code, or you can just go back and notify the respective developers. Okay, so that's where what will happen. We will be able to take necessary action and tell the developers on what action they have to do. And same way, like I said, if it's the faulty code, I can remove it so that until he fixes, that code will not be available in the latest. And when we do a build for QA, we will be always be able to take good code which doesn't cause any problem. Okay, so this process is what technically we call it as continuous integration, or in other words, what is continuous integration? So continuous integration is a process where for every check-in that a developer does, what we are going to do is we are going to immediately trigger a process of build in which we are going to take the latest code at that point of time and do a build and do a test quickly, which is a unit test. And if everything is fine, we will notify, or if in case, if it fails, we will take immediate action to notify the developers. And this way, it will help the developers to pretty much know whether his or her code has a problem. And at the same time, we will also be able to make sure that QA is unblocked. Okay. So that's what we call it as continuous integration. So is that first clear? What is continuous integration? Any questions here?
So before the process, how this process was managed before this continuous integration thing?
Like I said, we didn't do it manually. We didn't automate it. We were kind of doing it everything manually. Okay, so that's where someone has to spend time in finding out what is the problem, and like all you said, you need to discuss with different people and try to solve, which was time-consuming process. So that's where there's no big difference. So continuous integration is just a small change where we are just adding a new build process in between what a developer is doing and what we are going to do a full build for QA. So in between, this whole process started coming only when the DevOps principles were implemented. So in DevOps, we are trying to say, why do we have to wait for a build to happen at some point of time? Instead, what we can do is go ahead and automate a process which can help me to trigger a build as soon as the check-in happens. Getting it?
Okay, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, if no questions, then I understand that you are aware of it. So now the next point comes is, how are we going to achieve? Okay, so let's assume if this responsibility is given to you, or as an organization, how are you going to solve? So if you look at this, there needs to be a process which goes to your repository, okay, and keeps monitoring it very frequently. And whenever someone finds a change, immediately you should trigger a process, or what we call it as a pipeline or a workflow, in which you should take the latest code and then you should be going ahead with the different steps that you need. Okay, and this should happen for every check-in that a developer does almost. And now, like this, what if I tell you that if you go back to the basics of, again, version controlling system, it is not that you are going to store all the files into a repository directly. because inside a repository, there is one more layer called as branch. And in that, you are going to store. So now, to support your release, you might be having different branching, like feature branching model or integration branches or release branches. Now, what if I want to set up the whole process on different feature branches? Then the amount of work is doubled. And the same way, if you have multiple projects to take care, then what will happen? You need to do the same process on multiple branches, on multiple projects. So manually doing this will not be an easier task. So we need an automation which can help us. And not just only the CI process, but now if I go back, you also have the same concept of nightly build, which I was talking earlier. Still, I need a scheduled way in which we should be able to trigger this on some need basis or on a scheduled basis, right? So for all these things, we need a mechanism wherein you need to connect to different tools and get this process enabled. Now for this, the major activity that you have is you need a scenario, because if you take a nightly build, exactly, let's say every day at 6 o'clock in the evening or once in 4 hours, I want to connect to a machine, do a clone of my workspace and run some Maven command, and then try to do some test and then generate some jar or bar, and you can copy it further to some other location. So this is going to happen at a scheduled place. But when you talk about continuous integration, what are we going to do in this? So here, there is no schedule, but whenever there is a new check-in happening, only at that time you should trigger. Then you should have a mechanism which monitors the branches in your repo, and only when there is a new check-in happen, then that process should trigger, where after it gets triggered, we should go to a machine and do the same thing of integrating the code, build and test. But post that, if you want to send a notification, then you have to set it up. So that's how what we are in need is of a automation system. Okay. So that's when Jenkins comes into the picture. Okay. So now if you try to understand, initially Jenkins as a tool was introduced to solve the build problems, which is what we are talking about, nightly builds or scheduled builds or CI builds. Okay. So what Jenkins is going to do is, instead of you doing all this activity manually, you can input the same to Jenkins and Jenkins can automate it. But by saying it, what you're going to think of is Jenkins as an automation framework where you are going to tell 3 things to Jenkins. That is, what do you want Jenkins to do? Okay. And where it has to do that. And then when it has to do that. Okay. So any kind of task, for example, nightly build. Every day at 6 o'clock or every 4 hours, I want to connect to a machine, and in that I should do some series of steps like doing a clone of the workspace and then running a build command and running a unit test command. Now, instead of redoing it, you can tell to the same Jenkins, like Jenkins, when should I do? That is where you should give a schedule wherein this is the time every day. What I want you to do is do some task. So that is when, but where it is going to do. So that is where, instead of you connecting to a machine, you are going to give the same machine to Jenkins saying, this is the machine where I want you to run. So once in 4 hours, it will go to that particular machine. But what you want to do, that is the third one in which you are going to tell every day at once in 4 hours, when you go to this particular machine, I want you to run some series of steps, which includes doing a clone, doing a build, and doing a unit test. So then that is what we call it as a nightly build process. The same way, if you talk about continuous integration, then there's a small change in the process, because this time it is not very frequently or once in 4 hours that you are going to run this, but you need to first check whether a particular repository and a branch in that has a new checking or not. So that way you tell Jenkins that when to do. So that is where when to do is a scenario in which you are trying to tell Jenkins, okay, when you should run this process. The process should be triggered whenever there is a new check-in available. So that's how you give the condition on when it has to trigger. And once this happens, what is the next thing is to do? It needs to go to a machine, that is where to connect. So based on that, whenever a check-in happens, Jenkins only then will go to that particular machine and it will be triggering whatever the series of steps that you give. So that way, Jenkins in general acts as an automation framework where you can tell what it has to do, when it has to do, and where it has to do. And over the period, if you understand, Jenkins not only was used for doing different builds like CI builds or nightly builds, but as the generic way that I was saying, you can use it for various automation which is needed for deployments or for your day-to-day operations, or you can also use it for your QA purpose to do some test trigger. Because in all this activity, in general, what do? You go to a machine whenever you want, and then you run some application or some command. Right? So if you are a QA person and you are automating some test suite execution, when I say, can you run this test suite? Then you have to connect some machine on need basis, and then you're going to run some command or some application. The same thing you give it to Jenkins. So you tell Jenkins, now what is that I want you to automate as a processes? Whenever I tell you, go to a QA machine and run this command. That way, you're telling what to do, where to run, and when to do it. Same thing, if you're trying to do some operations where you want to deploy. Now, what is deploying? So pretty much there is a machine, which could be QA or production. I want to run my application in that, which is what we call it as deployment. Now, instead of you doing it, you can tell the same thing as an automation process to Jenkins on Jenkins, whenever I tell you or whenever I give you a condition, if that condition is met, at that time, I want you to connect to a particular machine and run some commands. So that's where Jenkins, as of now, is a global automation tool or an automation framework where you can use it for different kinds of builds, your continuous integration, or for doing your testing automation, or for your operation automation. For all those things, what we are going to do is specify what is that Jenkins has to do, which is a series of steps, and where it has to do and when it has to do. Okay, so that's what I want you to think going forward. So don't just think Jenkins is only for build. Jenkins can also be used for various activities, but provided you give these three basic things to Jenkins. Okay, is this clear first? Any question? Okay, if a dev has done unit test and it is passed, then why he should be doing automated test in Jenkins? Okay, Jenkins is not going to do an automated test. But before that, we were talking about something called as continuous integration. Now, when a developer does a test, as you said, it is a unit test. So what will that unit test validate? Whether the file that he modified, which is 1.java or 2.java or a combination of this, that's what he's going to look. But when we try to have a product, we need to see how this 1.java or 2.java or 4.java is working together. So that will not be happening at a developer's place. So that's the reason what we do is we need to take all the code integrated, and then we should be quickly once again verifying the unit test and cross check whether the latest changes done by the developer, is it going to work or not. Okay, so that's the whole point of how a developer will be notified, because unit test will not capture everything. So we need to do one level of integrating everything and doing another unit test with whatever the developer has latest changes. So that's where we are going to do. No, this is not called as a integrated testing, but it is actually still called as a unit testing, but you are going to do a unit test of the entire code what we have along with the latest code. So that's where we call it as integrated test. Okay, this will not be done by developer. Okay, so we need to capture and we need to set up, which is where the new process that we are introducing. But now the problem, what I'm trying to explain is, this is a process, but who is going to do? Are we going to sit and do manually? No. So that's where we are going to tell that Jenkins to do that automation. Okay. If not, Jenkins is the dumb tool. Okay. It doesn't do anything by itself. So you have to tell what it needs to do, where it has to do, and when it has to do. So one among them is, like I said, a continuous integration or a nightly build, or for your testing, or you can use it for your deployment. Okay. Everyone else? Is that clear in a very high level? What is Jenkins? Okay, if that's clear, then how does Jenkins work? Okay, now when you take Jenkins, Jenkins has two components. Okay, one we call it as the server, or this is what we call it as master. So any communication that you are going to do will be only through the master, and master is the one which is going to handle different executions or different processes that you want to automate. So that way, you're going to take one machine, and in that machine, you are going to install Jenkins. Okay, so you will install Jenkins in only one machine, and that machine is what we call it as master. So what happens after that? Now, when you are trying to do some automation, instead of you going to a machine, you are going to tell Jenkins to connect to a machine, where to run. That is what I was telling you, right? So for example, if you're trying to do a CI build, then where should Jenkins connect and do that build? If you're doing a nightly build, where do you want Jenkins to connect to that and do the build? Same way, if you're trying to do QA automation, where do you want Jenkins to connect and run some application or a tool, or some test suits that you want? Or if you say deployment, where do you want Jenkins to connect and do some deployment? Now for all those things, Jenkins needs to know the machine. So that machine is generally called as Jenkins slave or Jenkins node. Okay, so this is where you can have different nodes or Jenkins slaves available. So on need basis, you will tell to the Jenkins master that this is the machine to which you have to connect and you have to execute some stuff. Okay, so remember, the machine in which you are going to install Jenkins is called as master, and all the other machines to which Jenkins is going to connect is what we call it as slave. Okay. Now, in Jenkins, how does it knows all the different activity? So this is where Jenkins is a web application. So when I say web application, so you are going to basically use a URL and you are going to configure, run, and look at everything from there. Okay. Now what happens is, since Jenkins is a web application developed using Java, then the web page that you see in Jenkins is like a dashboard. Okay. And by default, you have to tell what and all are the plugins you need to install. With the help of that, there will be some options which is going to be visible for you. If not, it is going to be like a plain dashboard. Now to compare it, let's take your web browsers. So when you install a web browser like Chrome or Firefox, what do you get? Some default functions you will get. But if you want a weather report to be added, or if you are doing some shares and you want to see the shares, or you want to see some news, then what you do? So you add some plugins. Because of that, there will be some specific option that will be visible to you on your browser, right? In the same way, in Jenkins, by default, it will be empty. So you need to install plugins, and with the help of the plugin in the Jenkins dashboard, there will be some options visible to you. So remember, the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to install the plugins, and based on that only, it will be giving you options. So whether you are going to connect to a tool or an application, everything is through plugins. So only with the help of a plugin in that web page, you will be getting different options. Okay. Now, once you install the plugins, the next thing what you're going to do is you need to tell what are those slave machines to which Jenkins has to connect. Because now this could be a Windows machine, this could be a CentOS machine, or this could be even a cloud machine like an AWS or an Azure machine. Now, how does Jenkins knows what is this machine and how to connect? So that way, in Jenkins, you need to do something called as node configuration, which is on the master, where for every slave machine, you are going to configure and tell the details. Okay. For example, now if I want Jenkins to connect to a machine here, I need to tell, okay, this machine is a Linux machine, and to connect it, this is the IP address and this is the username and credential that you're going to use. Same way, if this machine is a cloud machine, then you're going to give what is the IP or what is the DNS name or FQDN, and then what is the username, and is there any PEM file or is there any private or public file you're going to keep. So that's how each and every machine to which the master is going to connect to do some task anytime, then you need to add that machine as part of the node configuration. So tomorrow you have one more automation to do. For that, you want Jenkins to connect to a different machine. Then you first give the details about that in the node configuration. That's how Jenkins knows that, okay, these are my slaves or the nodes to which I will be connecting on need basis. Okay, so that is the node configuration. Then once you install a plugin, the next thing it will give you option for the tools to be configured. So for example, now I want Jenkins to connect to this machine and do a night rebuild. Now for that, I want Jenkins to run some command like git command or maven command, or if you're trying to run some test like Selenium based commands or Docker based commands, whatever it is. Now, Jenkins will now know which machine to connect. But in that machine, where is the tool available? Because when you install a plugin, for each and every tool you want to install, first you should install a plugin. So that's where in the tool configuration, you're going to tell the details about where is Git available, where is Maven available, where is JDK available, where is Selenium available, where is GitLab available or GitHub available, where is Docker available, everything you're going to tell. Okay, so that's how Jenkins will know on where is the tool available, based on which when we run some tasks, it will be picking up the tools in this machine based on the configuration. Okay, so that's the next configuration that you're going to do. Then there is something called as system configuration. So for running Jenkins, there are some configuration that you have to set, or there are some global values or environment variables you are going to set. So those kind of configurations you're going to do under system configuration on the Jenkins master. Okay. And finally, now, once you have the plugins installed, and after the plugin, you will be able to configure the tool and system and the node configuration. Then finally, you are going to create what we call it as a job. Okay, a job is nothing but a process that you want to automate. So I can have a job for CI build, I can have a job for nightly build, and I can have a job for my QA tests, or I can have a job for deployment. So that way, job is nothing but what is that automation that you're going to do in Jenkins, which is where you are going to configure all the things that you mentioned above. So for me to do a nightly build, I will tell when to run. That is every day once in 4 hours. Okay, where to run? Then I will say, okay, go to this machine or this machine depending on my need. So once in 4 hours, it will connect to that particular machine, and then what to do. This is where I will say, do a git clone or run the Maven command or some unit test or send a mail. So that way I will give the steps of what I want. So this is where you are going to finally define the job, which will have what to do, where to do, and when to do, which you will be using from the configurations that you have done above. Okay. Now, all these things we are going to do from the master. Now, what is so special about Jenkins is, the first thing that you should know is, when you're trying to automate a task as a job, and you tell what to run, where to run, and when to run, especially when you're trying to tell this to run on a particular machine, then what will happen is, if this machine is not available, then your automation is not going to work. Because that is what in your regular day-to-day, you will be doing what we call it as a scheduled process. Like in Linux, you have a cron, correct? Or a cron tab. So what will that do? At a given time, it will be running certain things. But what if the machine itself is down? Nothing will work. So instead of that, in Jenkins, what we can do is, rather tying one machine to a job, you can actually create a group. Okay, and you can give this group as where to run to a job. So suppose if I want to do a nightly build, I can refer to a group name which has multiple machines. And what Jenkins can do, Jenkins can pick up any one of the machine which is available in this group at that time, and then it will go ahead and execute whatever that you want as a task. Because if one machine is not there, Jenkins knows the other machine availability. So this way, your execution of the job will always be highly available. Okay, and that's where in real time, rather than tying up to one machine, you are going to create a group, which is one of the major advantage of Jenkins. Okay, so don't tie a machine, instead tie a group of machines wherein Jenkins can pick what is available. Okay, so this way Jenkins acts as a replacement for your cron. So you don't need a separate cron. In the Jenkins itself, you can tell when to run, and based on that, it will connect to the machines and it will be executing everything. Okay. However, if you do not tell Jenkins where to run, okay, then what Jenkins will do is, Jenkins will directly run on the master itself as a default behavior. Okay, so that's where it's very important for you to create a machine first, add it as a node configuration, and then when you are going ahead with a job, you need to specifically tell that which is the machine or the group to which it is going to pick. If you do not tell anything, Jenkins will run on top of it. Okay, so that's how, using the Jenkins master, you install the plugin, configure the nodes, put the tools, whatever you want to configure, and then define different types of jobs. And then for the job, you tell where to run, and based on that, Jenkins will be connecting to those machines or a group, and based on that, it will be running the task, which is one. But the second advantage, if you now see, is it acts as a dashboard. So I can have hundreds of jobs running on Jenkins master, but at any point of time, if I go to the Jenkins master, I can see all the details about those 100 jobs running, whether it is running or not running, what happened. So instead of me monitoring it as individually, I can see everything in one dashboard and I'll be able to see the logs. Okay. So this is one. And the next advantage of Jenkins is when you are connecting to a machine, what will happen? You use some console to connect to a machine, correct? Now, for example, let's say that I have connected to a machine here. Okay. Now, whatever that I type, as long as this console is available, everything will be present. But what happens as soon as I come out of this machine or I clear the screen or close this, then the output is completely gone. But in Jenkins, what happens? Each and every job that you are executing, okay, it will keep a log of that. So that is where you don't need a separate log. Jenkins keeps a track of each and every console log or the output of all the commands or the script that you have given for Jenkins on what to run. So that way, Jenkins maintains the history also, so that you can quickly go back and have a look at what happened at some time, whether that job got executed or not, or what is the status of it. So that's how Jenkins acts as a dashboard to show you all the details. Jenkins acts as a replacement of cron, and given a group of machine, it can connect to any machine which is available. And the other one is Jenkins will also help you to keep a track of the entire console log. So that's where we can use Jenkins for various automation. Okay, so that way continuous integration is just one of the tasks, but I want you to focus in a DevOps. There are a lot of things that we can do. Okay, so is this clear first on what is Jenkins, what is the Jenkins architecture, so that with the help of this we can first understand the basic setup and try to see how a basic automation is going to work and how Jenkins can be used for all of them. And then we will get a little deeper into defining different kinds of pipeline, wherein one method is to use the dashboard directly. The other method is to write code, which is the pipeline method, wherein we will try to see how different kinds of pipelines can be executed. Okay. So before that, any question on what is CI, or for a minute, don't worry too much about CI, but what is Jenkins and what is the architecture of Jenkins? Please feel free to ask questions if something is not clear, okay? Because unless you don't ask, I'll not be able to know whether you have understood or not, okay? Okay, Amit, Ashwini, Balaji, Jagan, Kodai, Neeraj, Priya, Punit, Ram, Vijay. Okay, cool. Now, with this small introduction, let's actually jump into practicals, because anyway. Now, for running this, now ideally we need two machines, right? At least to start with. I need one master and I need one slave. Now you can also do everything in one machine, but at least bare minimum I need one machine. If not, I need two machines. Okay. Now coming back to the lab. So do every one of you have at least two VMs where in one VM you can install master and at the other VM you can install, I mean, basically you don't need to install, but you can just use it as a slave to do all the practice. So does everyone has 2 VMs with you right now?
No.
Okay, so do you guys know how to create a VM? I believe in your laptop, we were told that you have some hypervisors using which you can create machines.
Even if you are trying to create VMs, our system should support, right? So few of the people have only 8 GB RAM in their system. So for them, it will not be even supported. Creating a VM and it requires its own voice, right?
Okay, unfortunately, we were told that all of your laptops will have sufficient resource and we don't have to worry about the infra. You guys can create VMs. That's the reason from the beginning I was trying to tell you that you have this. Okay, maybe would like to just put a pause and ask a question. How many of you have a hypervisor like VM or VM player installed on your laptop, which you can use for practicing now? Can someone please tell me how many of you have it? No. I'm not asking who don't have, I'm just asking to do it in a reverse way. How many of you have VMs available on your laptop that you can just create a machine?
So I have a VM and in that I have CentOS installed, but I don't think so I can create 2 VMs because I only have single VM and the laptop becomes very much slow after that.
Yeah, that's okay. I got it. But yeah, that's what I said. We were told that most of your machines will be minimum of 16 GB RAM, and that's where you can create at least 1 VM. I mean, it may not be 2, at least 1, and you can try to use the same for all the practice. That is what we were trying to inform. So that's the reason I'm asking question now. Does any one of you have a machine in which you already have any kind of hypervisor installed and you can readily use that laptop of yours to create a VM if needed now and do all these things what you have? Anyone? That's what my question.
Yes, sir. I have a machine sir, with VM installed and CentOS thing in it.
Okay, fine. Anyone else? Guys, at least I need an answer from everyone on this. Okay, I do see only 2 people out of 24. Now, please tell me only those who have. If you don't reply, then I will consider that you don't have a separate VM or you don't know how to create a VM on your machine. That's what I'm considering. Okay. All right. I do see only 3 or 4 of you have, and I didn't get an update from others, so I'll consider you don't have a machine. Okay. I think for now, for Jenkins, it's okay. It's not a big challenge, but moving forward for other things, we might need a separate machine. Okay. So in meantime, what I want you guys to do is okay. So does any one of you or do you guys have any account in public cloud like AWS or Azure? Then you can create some machines for your practicing. If not, what I want you to do is 2 things. I hope everyone has Windows only, right? Laptop. So go to Jenkins, okay? And in the Jenkins, as you see the page, go to the left side, which is LTS, okay? So this stands for long-term support. So go to the left side, and depending on your OS, if it is Windows, click on this and you will be getting a zip file inside which you will be having a exe. Okay, so make sure just double click on that and you install it quickly. Okay, so that should be sufficient for your laptop. But before that, make sure you have latest version of JDK or you have JDK 1.8. So same way, I believe if your laptop has, it's okay. If not, you have to download the version which allows from your organization. Suppose if you have a network where proxy doesn't allow. So these two things I need. Make sure you have JDK 1.8 available.
Sir, can you repeat the process, sir? Sir, can you repeat this, please?
Yep, I'm trying to. Okay, for Jenkins to run, you need JDK 1.8. Okay, so make sure whatever machine that you're going to try, if it's on your laptop, make sure you have JDK 1.8 installed. And then from this particular location, go to the Jenkins LTS and try to install Windows, or suppose if you are on any other OS, you can directly install it. Okay, but if you're using other flavors like Ubuntu or CentOS, I'll tell you what to do. But if not, if it is on your Windows, then make sure you install JDK 1.8 and install this Jenkins server for Windows. Okay, now when you try to download this, you will get a zip file inside which there will be an exe. So make sure you just double click and install that. Okay, so just download this for now and keep it ready so that I'll show you what is the next process.
Only one question. Jenkins can be run as a WAR file also, right? Is there any reason for running it as a exe file instead of a WAR file?
You don't need a WAR file. Okay, suppose if you are running as a WAR, what do you need to run WAR?
I can just use the command java Jenkins.var and then I can access the console through 9000 port, right?
No, that won't work. That's the old method of the. No, that's what I'm trying. Hold on.
Okay.
I know it is going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, but ideally, for doing the entire console management,
okay,
either you are going to have an application support which will be giving you a console management better way. But
okay,
if not, if you're using VAR, then you are manually running it and you have to stop, start, and changing things will be difficult. So that's
okay,
where when you install it as a exe or an installer or a package in Linux, you will
okay,
also get a service. So as a user, it's all going to be one command, wherein internally there will be a service already running, and anytime
yes,
when you stop and start your machine, everything will be running fine. So that way, we don't prefer, or especially I don't suggest to use var, because internally when you run this, that will be calling the var starting the service. That way, this is more better way of doing it.
okay.
So can you repeat this, sir?
Okay, so what happens is when you try to install it as a package, okay, the method that you download from here. So whether it is Windows or any other Linux machine, if you try to install, it will be installed as a package. And what this package will do is, it will use the Java, and internally there will be a var file which comes along with this package. So it will basically try to run this var, and then it will be giving you a console. But for that, starting and stopping, what it will do, it will create it as a service, whether it is a Windows service or a Linux service, depending on the machine, it will be able to create. So that's how what you can do. You can see whether your Jenkins is running or not running, and then you can access it from the dashboard or the console, which I'll tell you later. But this is needed for installing. Okay, so one is as a package, when you install, it will download the var and it will set up a service, and just a click of a button by starting this service, your Jenkins will also start or restart depending on your need. So that's where I want you to install this as a package. So for you, if you're using Windows, just go ahead and download this. And before that, make sure you have JDK 1.8. And once you download, there will be an exe. Just double click on that.
Adam, it is fine if I have OpenJDK instead of a JDK 1.8.
It should be fine. Until if you have the latest one, it should be good. OpenJDK will work, if not Oracle.
It's 11 now, OpenJDK 11.
Yeah, you can try running. We will see if there is any dependency. If not, it should be good.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway. Yeah, for those who are having a VM, can you quickly have Ubuntu? Again, the reason why I want Ubuntu to be there is it's little easy for certain dependencies. Because if you're going with CentOS, then there are a lot of dependencies and services that you want to manage, and it'll be a little difficult. So if you are not in a position to create a Ubuntu VM today, it's fine. You also go ahead and use the same on your Windows for practicing. But later on, you can try to set up a Ubuntu machine because certain operations will be very easy. Then when you want to set up your real project, later on, you can set up whatever that you want, Jenkins from scratch, from CentOS based on the dependency. If not, right now for the practice, it will be very easy if you use Ubuntu. Okay. So that way, as I said, if you can't get a Ubuntu-based VM, no problem. You can use your own Windows laptop to install JDK 1.8 and or the latest, and then try to have the Jenkins for Windows package downloaded. Okay, so just get this done, and meantime, we'll just take a break and come back. All right. Cool. If you have already installed, that's good. You can just start accessing. Yeah, just try to download in the break, and then we'll connect back in another 10 minutes. Yeah, I'll come to that. I'll show you how to proceed. For now, I'm just saying we have some 10 minutes break. Just click on this download and leave it. Then I'll show you how to configure it. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so it's almost like 10:52. So let's take a 10 minutes break and we'll sync back again. Is that okay? Or I don't see an answer, so you want to continue? No? You want to continue? Do you guys want a break or not? Yeah, then do tell me. If you don't tell anything, then like I said, I'll consider.
So we want a break, sir, to install Java and all that.
No, don't worry. That I will come back. When I say break, take a break. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just sync back another 10 minutes. Yeah, I'll be on mute, guys. I'll be back in another 10 minutes. Hey, is everyone back? Okay, I see only 3 people replying. Let me give another 2 minutes for others to join. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do, since I need 2 machines, I'm just using AWS to quickly create 2 machines. And I'm just going to take Ubuntu. And I'll take the default machines. And since I need 1 master and 1 slave, so I'll just create 2 machines. Okay, so Jenkins master. Okay, so I just have 2 machines. Now, on both the master and the slave, we need to make sure that the same version of Java is available. Okay, so that's the important thing that we have to do. Right, but yeah, let me just give a minute and start. But meantime, let me connect. Okay. So is everyone here?
Yes.
All right, that's great. Okay, so what I've done quickly is I have created 2 Ubuntu-based Linux boxes on AWS so that one I can use it as the Jenkins master, and the other one I'll be using it as the node or the slave to which Jenkins will be connecting. Okay. Now, so if you're trying to install Jenkins on Linux, like I said, depending on whatever the OS that you're taking, first you need to make sure you're going to install a specific version of Java or the latest version of Java on both the master and the slave machine. So what I'll do now, since I'm taking Ubuntu, I'll be using more of OpenJDK, and I'm taking OpenJDK 8. So quickly, this is what I'm going to do on both the machines. So first, this is the master, just to show you the difference. So the master is the one which has the ID 54, and the slave is the one which has the IP 106. However, Java needs to be installed on both of them. So if you are using Windows for now, just install only the latest version of Java. So let me just quickly install it, apt update. And the same thing on the node. Okay, so there's nothing much needed on the slave machines to install because we are going to use Jenkins master to connect through SSH method. Okay, so that way on the master, what we will do once Java is installed, we will try to install the latest version of Jenkins. Now for that, what we will do is I need to set up a key and the package location for the Ubuntu repository. So instead of that is what you would have directly downloaded from the Jenkins page, which I showed you. I can use that also, but since I'm using more of a console way, I cannot download or. So instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just specify the repository location as a package. I can directly go ahead and install Jenkins. So for that, let me first add the repository key from where to download on the master. So now Java is available. And you can see Java 1.8 is available on master, and pretty much on the slave 2, I should be having the same version of Java. Okay, so we have same version of Java on master and the slave. Okay, so on the master, I'll just set the key and I will also set the repo list. And then let me do an update and I'll go ahead and install Jenkins package instead of downloading. And I'm going to do this from the master alone. So you don't need to install Jenkins on all the machines. One machine is sufficient. Okay, by the time this gets installed, if you have installed Jenkins on your machine after JDK, how do you cross-check whether the Jenkins service is running? Okay, so what I want you to do is go to run prompt and type services.msc. Okay, so this is on your Windows. So if you just click on run and type services.msc, and if you enter on your Windows, it will be showing you all the Windows services that is running. From that, you can cross check whether your Jenkins service is running, or anytime when you reboot your machine, if the service is not running, you can stop or start or restart. Okay. So this is the services dashboard by default in Windows. So when you enter services.msc, you will be getting this. From this, just search for Jenkins. Now, I don't have installed it on Windows, but in your place, you should be getting some service like this. In case if it is not running, you will get an option here to start. Right now, for example, this service is already running. So that's the reason I'm just going to stop or restart whenever I want. Same way for you, search for Jenkins as a service in your Windows and make sure that it is running. Okay, so that's first thing that you're going to do. Suppose if you're using a Linux box, then when you're running Linux, then you're going to use the different service. So for Windows, this is the one, but for Linux, you're going to say systemctl status Jenkins. Okay, and you should see that there is a process already running. So this is another way that you can cross-check whether your Jenkins service is running. Now, once Jenkins is running, like I said, it's a web application. And how are you going to access? So any web application that you say will be running or technically listening on a port number unique to it. So if you try to access that port number on the machine where it is running, you will be able to access your application. So in that way, first to cross-check whether your application is listening on a port, Jenkins by default runs on port 8080. Okay, so that way on a Linux box, if you want to cross-check whether Jenkins is first listening on the port 8080, then there is a command called netstat. Okay, now this will show you by default all the ports which is available on your machine. But what you can do is you can simply say netstat -an and grep for 8080, because Jenkins by default runs in port 8080 or listens to 8080. So that way, in this current machine, Jenkins service is up and running, and you can see port 8080 is also listening. So if you want to access this, then on your Windows, what I want you to do is open a browser and just say localhost:8080 or HTTP localhost:8080 on your browser. Can everyone do that? If you're using Windows, then open your browser and just type in http://localhost:8080, which is nothing but this HTTP localhost:8080. That means you are trying to connect to the port 8080 in which Jenkins is listening on the same machine. In case if you are trying to use a VM and in that you have installed Jenkins, then from your laptop, you are going to use the IP of the machine :8080. Suppose a couple of you said you have a VM, right? So in that case, the Jenkins will be running inside the VM, but from your laptop, if you want to access, then you have to say the machine IP :8080. Similar to that, now I have the Jenkins installed on this Ubuntu master, which is on AWS. So if I want to access this, so what I need to do is I need to use the machine IP from my laptop on the browser, and then I can access. So for that, let me go to AWS and get the DNS name for this machine. So this is the one. So I can take this. So if I just come back here, browser, I can just say :8080. So this is where I'm accessing Jenkins. Okay. Now for you, if you're using Windows, like I said, just give localhost :8080 and you should be getting some page like this. So has everyone reached until this place?
Yes.
Anyone having difficulties or haven't tried? So those who have got until this step, can you please put a message in the chat that you are able to install Jenkins? Okay. Okay, what's the issue when you say forbidden? Which machine are you using? Windows? Okay. When you say installation, right? Which step? Is it while you are downloading the file or when you are running the exe, it gave you a message? Okay, wait a minute. Don't jump into the next page. So you're completed until this here, right? Okay, now, yeah, if you have not proceeded, like it says, to unlock Jenkins, it will be giving you a file from which you want to read the initial password. Now, since it's a Linux box, it's asking me to read from this. Whereas if it is Windows, it would have told you C drive or D drive where you have installed Jenkins. So let's unlock it. So let me go to the Jenkins master and I'll read this file. And this is the initial password. Now, once you click continue, now this is where the very first step that you have to do in Jenkins is install plugins. Okay. Now, Jenkins has a default set of plugins that it gives us in the beginning. So you can make use of that. But as we move forward, we can go ahead and install whatever the plugins we need on demand basis. But to get started, it's always good that you go ahead and install all the suggested plugins, because this is the one which is going to give you all the basic plugins like Git, JDK, Maven, SSH connection, everything will be there. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and click on install suggested plugins. Did everyone choose this? And once you click on this, you can see it will be displaying the list of plugins that it is going to install.
Adam, I'm getting the offline, the Jenkins instance appears to be offline.
Where is it? Is it after installing plugin?
It is after entering the password by accessing default port.
Okay, can you check your connectivity once?
Actually, I'm using Office LAN, so it is already configured on proxy. So shall I disable that or what?
Yeah, that's a good point. Can you disconnect VPN and try?
Okay.
Yeah, for everyone, like I said, if you are inside your Office network, what you're trying to do is download it from a public repository. Okay, so all these plugins are available on open source. So if you have a proxy setting or a VPN setting, then that might not be allowing you to download. So make sure you disconnect from VPN and then just try to install the plugin or refresh the page once again, give the password and then install it. Anyone facing any other errors? Chinmay, what's the error that you're getting? Password error? Did you give the correct password? Okay, so if you go to the page, it will tell you to read from a particular file. For example, in Linux, it says go to a secret folder where you have installed, and then it's asking to read from a file called initial admin password. Okay, can you share your screen and show me what is that error you're getting? Where did you be? No, can you go back to the Jenkins console and show me what is the path it is giving? Okay, wait a minute. Fine, so installed it here, is it? Fine. Can you directly go to this folder, the secret folder?
Yeah, actually, I'm also facing the same issue, but the thing is, when I'm going by manual, so it is work.
No, that's what. File folder access will not be there, so just go manually. Go until the secret folder. Yeah, you shouldn't have installed on this location. You should have given a separate folder, but anyway. Let's see if any other issues. Okay. One thing, that go to that folder, don't directly give because that is fine. Okay, so try to go to the folder until secrets using your Windows Explorer. Then that you open the file for initial password. If it's giving trouble, then what you do is you can install Jenkins on different machines, use the system instead. create a folder on your desktop and put it, or if you have somewhere like D drive, then give the path while it is installing Jenkins. Anyone else facing any other issues? Yeah, if you are having problem in accessing the Windows folder, then what you do is the service that it is already running, like I said, stop that service, okay, and then install Jenkins on a different folder where you can access, not on the C Windows System 32. You can use D drive or in the C drive on the desktop or some other location where you have access. Go ahead and install it.
Adam, we couldn't hear you properly.
Am I audible?
It's a bit clumsy. Voice is breaking a bit.
For everyone, am I audible? Hello. One second. Hey, is it better now?
No. No. Is it for everyone? Not sure.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm saying if you are not able to access on the C drive, create a different folder in C drive like desktop or some other location where you have access, and you install once again. Same way, if you have D drive, you can also use D drive to install. Don't put it under C Windows System 32. Okay, and before you do that, go to the services.msc and stop whatever the current Jenkins which is running. Okay, so that you don't want duplicate instance running. First, make sure whatever existing is running, just stop that service by going to services.msc and then try to install it again on a different folder. Yeah, if you've changed, it should work. Okay, for all others, once it has completed your default plugins installation, you should get this page. Were you able to get this page?
Yes.
Okay. Fine, we'll wait. But let me know, others, if you're able to get this page. Once your plugins has been installed, you should be getting this page. Okay, see, you are again referring to Jenkins, which is running on the previous one. And that's where I said stop the previous service. Yeah, the 8080 is still pointing to old one, right? So you need to stop the previous one. It's better you restart machine once if the service is still running. Yeah, sure. Okay, I think you try restarting the machine. No, that's a problem. See, if your previous installation of Jenkins is still running, the service will be mapping. That's where it goes to this. So first, before you install, make sure that either you uninstall completely, that's also good, or stop the service, whatever you have in the previous one. And then make sure you restart your machine and then try to install Jenkins on D drive. If not, every time, if it is still pointing to the old one, that's because the old reference is what it is trying to take. Okay. Yeah, just do this. Uninstall the current version and try to restart your machine. Then there will be no reference of port 8080. Then try to install it on a D drive separately and then try so that it points to the new version. Okay. Yeah, but for all others, are you able to complete the default plugin installation step? Okay, so by default, Jenkins doesn't come with any administrator account. So what you need to do is, for the first time, go ahead and create the default user for the admin in Jenkins to log in. So that way, now I'm just going to create a default user. Okay, and I'm just going to give my email. Okay, now same way you fill in your respective details currently and go ahead and say save and continue. Now going forward, this is the URL that you would be using to connect to Jenkins, which is nothing but the same one. So save and finish. Now, anytime when you have finished this, what you're going to connect is to the Jenkins dashboard. So this is called as the default Jenkins dashboard. Okay. So anytime when you connect, it will be asking you the username and password that we just gave, and using that you will be able to log in. Okay. So this is called as Jenkins homepage, where you don't have anything. All we did is we have installed the default plugins. That's all. But we need to see how to install and configure the different things that I was showing you in this page. Okay. But before that, has everyone reached this place wherein you can see your Jenkins homepage?
It is asking for a restart, sir.
Restart?
Yes, sir. After that,
I didn't get restart of Jenkins.
Yes, sir, because after downloading the plugins, it is asking that for restart after setting the administrator password.
Oh, it shouldn't be asking you. Can you share your screen once?
I have connected from mobile, but I'm doing on my laptop, so I can't.
Okay, it shouldn't be asking you ideally, but yeah, go ahead and restart. If the plugin is being installed, the next time when you access 8080, it will just ask you the same default admin account. So using that, you can just register and start using it. Yeah, for others, are you able to get to this page? I think for today, that should be good enough. Anyone else who's having any other problem other than the drive location? Is everyone able to get this to this page?
Yes, sir, done.
Okay, I'm just waiting for others also to confirm. Yeah, if there's anyone facing any issues, let me know. We'll just try to see. So if not, what I want you to do is, I think you have to go back to your management and try to understand, because for Jenkins, initially, it should be good. We can just take your laptop and work. But as we move forward for Docker and Kubernetes, definitely you need to have a Linux box. Okay, then again, for that, you need resources. Your laptop will not be sufficient for it. So please try to talk to your teams respectively and find out what we can do. If not, if we are going with cloud, then we can take it up differently. But yeah, just try to let them know. And what is this? And second thing is, how many of you are not familiar with Git and some tools like Maven? See if you can let me know. Then based on that, I can share you some contents which you can go back, refer in your free time, because these are again the prerequisites what was mentioned to us for this. So maybe if I put a question, so how many of you are not familiar with Git workflow and the basic build workflow like Maven? Can you guys ping in chat?
I'm not familiar with Maven, sir.
Okay, Git.
So yes, I know about Git, sir.
Okay, cool. Okay, I do see only 3 people. Chinmay, Rajdev, in fact, only 2. So can I take all others are familiar with Git and the build tool like Maven? Because based on this, I'll not be focusing much into those. Then I can focus only onto the subject what we have like Jenkins. And again, Yeah, it doesn't mean that don't ask questions. It means that I'll be considering that you are aware and I'll be focusing more on the topics related to what we have. Okay, so Dhanalakshmi and Amit. So I have total 4 of you. All right, I'll do one thing. Let me ask the team to share 4 of you guys some materials and videos so that you can just go through in the offline and try to prepare. And for rest of them, I do understand that if you're familiar, it's good, but still, if there's any topic that you're not familiar in Git or Maven when we go through, just feel free to stop me and ask questions. Okay. Yeah, other than that, what we'll be doing is in the same way. So like I said, it's just more of introduction today. But let's always try to understand the problem statement, and then we will understand the architecture of the tool used to solve the problem. And in that, we will try to take scenario by scenario. And for that scenario, how are you going to work? Okay. And then what commands, tools that I'll show you. And then I'll give you time to practice. So this is the way that we will do. And as we move to the end, I'll give you some small assignments or projects that we can get more hands-on to understand. Okay. So that way, we'll start with Jenkins in a freestyle way where we will understand what are the various options available in Jenkins to do an automation. So more about understanding this basic architecture that I was explaining. Now, once you are familiar with all of them, then I'll introduce you to the pipelining concept where you will be writing certain syntax to get the same automation done through a file or a code. So once we have done, then let me get into step by step of containerization, Docker, and then we will come back to your Jenkins and then set up your actual CI pipeline or nightly pipeline, or in case if you have any other automation pipeline to do. So that way we'll finish the pipeline first, and then we'll again come back to Docker and understand how the images are there, because in Docker we have 3 things to learn. One is container management, image management, and orchestration. So that way we'll take step by step, and I'll come back to Jenkins and integrate. So once that CI is done, then we will go into your Kubernetes. And in the Kubernetes, we'll focus about how to set up, Dockerize, and use that deployments. And then we'll come back and see how the entire deployment will look like. Okay. So that way, make sure you have sufficient machines. If not, talk to your team and get those machines so that you can practice or work on all of them. But other than that, feel free to ask any questions. And like I said, for those who are not familiar with Git and Maven, and share some materials and videos you can go through. But even if not others, just brush up so that it will be easy from the next class. Okay. Sure. Any questions or doubts so far?
So why are we using Maven?
So Maven is a build tool for Java-based project, because I believe some of you were telling you are going to have Java-based project, right? So for compiling and doing certain basic unit testing or creating the package like jar or a var, you need a build tool. So in that way, for Java-based projects, Maven is one of our open source build tool, using which you can compile, package, or you can do unit test using that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where, yeah, if you're a developer, it's not needed that you should be mastering it, but aware of or being aware of certain basic workflow of Maven will be useful, because when we are going with different kinds of pipelines, you need to differentiate what commands that you will run. So if you have a little knowledge on that, will be helpful. Okay.
Okay.
All right, that's good then. If there are no questions, then let me stop the session today and make sure you fix this machine problem, whatever you have, and tomorrow we'll continue with all the other configurations that we discussed today. All right. Okay, sure. Then if there's no questions, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good day. Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.